Welcome to the first Defenders of Liberty lecture for conservative interns and staff. The American Conservative Union is the nation's largest and oldest grassroots lobbying organization. Founded in 1964, the ACU represents the views of Americans who are concerned with economic growth through lower taxes and reduced government spending, and the issues of liberty, personal responsibility, traditional values, and national security. Today's speaker, Congressman Jim Jordan, is the representative from the 4th District of Ohio. He currently sits on the Budget, Oversight and Government Reform, and Judiciary Committees. Being one of the most conservative members in the House, Representative Jordan received a 100 rating from the ACU in 2009, making him a defender of liberty. He has agreed to speak to us today, and when he is through, he is willing to answer any questions you might have. Please help me welcome Representative Jim Jordan.
Always tell folks don't clap. You haven't heard me talk yet. It's good to be with you all. Thank you, Stacy. Stacy was actually an intern in our office, did a great job, and so we appreciate that introduction and the work that ACU does. Larry and Vincent, we appreciate all you do. Look, as Stacy said, I'm going to make a few remarks, and then you can ask any question you want. I tell every single group I speak to in the district, out of the district, that you all pay my salary. And I try to remember that, so you can ask whatever you want. You can yell at me. We have this thing in America called the First Amendment. It's a good thing, and so you be ready to fire away. First of all, it's a great time to be a Republican. Great time to be a conservative. Look, we are likely to, the party that I belong to, and I assume the vast majority of you belong to, we are likely to make some huge gains this November, and I think, frankly, take back the House of Representatives, maybe the Senate, but more likely the House of Representatives, because the American people are simply saying enough is enough. They have had it with all the insanity that is going on in Washington with their government, and they're gonna let the some of these elected officials know in a very clear and compelling way come November. Think about this, and I've done this with many audiences. Think about what we've seen in the last 2 years that we never thought we'd see in the United States of America. Greatest country in the world, the United States of America, things we have witnessed that we never thought we would ever see in this great country. First of all, do you ever think you'd see the President of the United States fire the CEO of General Motors? You ever think we, the taxpayers, would own and run and operate General Motors? Did you ever think that we would see a stimulus, so-called stimulus bill passed that did nothing to actually stimulate and promote economic activity and create jobs? Did you ever think we'd see a health care bill passed? I mean, think about it. Those of you know political history and with the legislative process. We've never had a major piece of legislation passed in this country without a major policy change, without it being done in a bipartisan fashion, and with at least a majority of the American people saying, you know what, we think that might make some sense. Until this past year when the health care bill passed, with a majority of Americans saying we don't want the legislation, and it was done in a completely partisan fashion. I tell folks all the time, you think about the health care bill, really what bugged people most, what bugged Americans most about the health care bill wasn't the taxes, all that was terrible, wasn't this all the bureaucrats and the thousands of pages that no one read, wasn't all the 51 different boards, commissions, ombudsmen, folks are going to get between you and your doctor. What really bugged Americans the most was this simple concept. Americans don't like to be told what to do. I mean, that's why we're Americans. I mean, think about it. Folks who started this place, they came here because in Europe they said you're going to have to practice your faith in a certain way, and they said, we don't particularly think we like that. We don't think that's what the good Lord wants us to do. We're going to go to America where we can practice our faith the way we want to. And then they got here, and after a while, Great Britain said, we're going to tax you. You're not going to get representation in Parliament. We don't particularly like that fact. In fact, we dislike it so much, we're willing to fight. We're willing to first proclaim to the world in the Declaration why we're going to fight, why we're going to start our own country, and we're willing to go to the mat on this one, because Americans don't like being told what to do. And here comes the federal government in all its, in all its wisdom, telling American citizens and families, here's how you're going to get your health care. And we don't, it's just part of being an American, part of our collective DNA. We don't like this idea that the government's going to tell us what to do. You guys know the old joke for most Americans when they're traveling down the highway and they see the sign that says 55. For most Americans, that's not the limit, that's the challenge. That's how we look at things, right? So here comes the government with the bill, all its problems, telling us what to do. Most Americans, we never thought we'd see this kind of thing take place in this country. Do you ever think we'd see OMB came out with their mid-season projections, budget projections, and deficit projections yesterday? $1.47 trillion deficit this year, largest in American history. And this follows on the heel of a $1.3 trillion debt. We are over $13 trillion debt. The OMB said yesterday, if on this pace, we will get to over $20 trillion in debt by 2020. I mean, we never thought we'd see the things that we have seen. The one day that stands out for me, and it probably doesn't stand out for as many Americans because it was, but you may remember back during the auto bailouts, now talk about a direct threat to liberty, a direct threat to freedom, a direct threat to private property rights. Back during the auto bailouts, you may remember when the president told the Chrysler secured creditors, went to a press conference, ridiculed the secured creditors. Now remember, when there's a bankruptcy, the secured creditors are the first in line. They're the ones that get the best deal. They get when they go through a bankruptcy, they get the. He told the secured creditors, he ridiculed them in front of the entire world at a press conference for not wanting to go for the deal that the government was putting together. And these guys were standing saying, we don't want the deal because we have a fiduciary responsibility to people that we represent to get as much back as we can. So he told these secured investors, ridiculed them in front of the entire world. And I thought, that day is a sad day in American history because it marks a direct attack on liberty and freedom and on private property rights, and yet we have seen it. Did you ever think the United States of America, this one got me, and I questioned this guy in committee, Feinberg, that we would have a federal government pay-czar telling private American citizens how much money they can make. And that's happening right now. And you could go on and on. I've talked about the debt, I've talked about the deficit. Look, I think we're going to win. What's important is when we do, we remember what we're about. And we remember that Republicans are supposed to be the party of principle. I tell everyone all the time that, because you can imagine sometimes when I'm out talking, and particularly across our district, they'll say, well, Jim, we appreciate all the good fighting you're doing. We appreciate the rating at ACU and when, the things you're working on. But you Republicans, before you got there, they spent too much. And I said, look, Republicans are kind of like the Israelites in the Old Testament. We get it wrong for a while, we hang out in the wilderness, then we get it right and get in power, and then we do some good, then we get it wrong. I said, but at least we get it right every once in a while. The Democrats always get it wrong. And the reason they always get it wrong is, remember, the Democrats are the party of government. Every concern, every perceived problem and big issue in America, they think the answer is more government, and not government at the local level, which might actually have a chance of making a difference, but more government here in Washington. It's always about this financial regulator, more government. Cap and trade, think about that. The answer to our energy problems is more control in Washington. Really? I mean, that's what they think. So their solution is always more government, or their attempt at a solution is always more government. We're the party of principle, and when we remember our principles, we win elections, and when we govern in that way, the American people are willing to keep us in power because deep down, the American people believe the same things that we actually believe. When we present them those principles in a compelling and articulate way. And really, they're just four. And it's what ACU is all about. Four big principles. The party of Reagan, the modern day Republican Party, is about four big things: strong national defense, reduce tax burden on families and small business owners so our economy can actually grow and we can have job creation take place, controlling spending. This is where we got to work. I've introduced the only balanced budget in Congress. We introduced it again this year. Our budget does the right things, keeps in place the tax cuts, actually further reduces taxes, protects Social Security, protects national defense. But I'll let y'all know a little secret. To balance a budget, you have to cut some spending. I mean, imagine that. You actually do have to reduce what government's spending, and we do it in our budget. So we're the party of strong defense, lower taxes, controlling spending, and this is the one that's important too. Defending traditional American values. I mean, it's so important that we remember we're the party that understands life is precious, life is sacred, should be protected. We're the party that understands the key institution in our culture is the family institution. And we should protect and defend and promote that institution in every single public policy we implement. One of the questions that was posed to me when I came to talk to you today was talk about why you're a conservative. And it's real simple, because the conservative philosophy is most consistent with a Christian worldview, with a Christian perspective. And it really boils down to what I just said. The key institution in our culture, the institution that ultimately determines the strength of the entire society, is the family institution. You think about the first institution the good Lord put together wasn't the state, wasn't the church, it was the family. And we should be the party that protects and defends that institution. And when you do that, when you adhere to the right principles, you always arrive at the right policy. And when you say, we're going to filter every question through filter every decision through this fundamental question, does it benefit families? You will get to the right policy. Those are the 4 principles that we should be all about. And when we are, we win elections, and I think we do the right things once we're in power, and people are willing to keep us in power. 3 big challenges we face. I'll finish with this, and then you can fire away at any question. 3 big challenges we face, and I'm going to start first with, and they fit into those 4 principles exactly. But the 3 big challenges I think we face in 2010 in the modern and dangerous world we find ourselves in. Challenge number 1 is the terrorist threat. It's as big and as huge as it gets. I tell this story. I've been in Congress now, I'm in my 2nd term, 3.5 years. First month on the job, one of the things they do for all the rookies is they take you to the Pentagon and they give you a briefing. This is new members to the House, new members to the Senate. So I go to the Pentagon. First part of the briefing's basic stuff. They're talking about how you deal with a family who has a family member serving in one branch of the service and you need to contact, and what happens if the terrible event of a service member from your district is killed in action or killed in theater. And practical, good information that every congressional, every Senate office needs to know. The second part of the briefing is they say, okay, we're going to take you down another room. Before you walk into the room, and remember, I'm just a country boy from St. Paris, Ohio, first time in Congress. They take you down this other room. They take your BlackBerry, your cell phone, walk into the room. They close the door, no windows. Biggest map of the world you've ever seen. Above the map, they actually flash the word secret. And we're not allowed to talk to you about what they tell us in the meeting. But I tell you what, just walking in that room leaves an impression on you, particularly a guy like me from Western Ohio. And the things they talk about, how dangerous the place is, it leaves an impression on you. It is a dangerous world, and we have to understand that, and we have to be able to deal with this challenge. Last year, I had the opportunity to travel to Israel. When you go there and see what this country faces, our number 1 ally, and all the folks around them who don't particularly like them, and what they're up against, you just realize how serious this threat is and how we have to be in tune with that. Second big challenge, and I referenced a little bit in some of the things earlier, is the economic challenge we face. Look, the answer, I've said it umpteen times over the last year and a half. If big government spending, big government regulation, big government taxation were going to get us out of this economic mess, well, heck, we'd have been out of it a long time ago, because that's all the government's been doing for 2 years. We know what works, and we know what doesn't work. What works is empowering families and small business owners, reducing the tax burden, getting spending under control, and implementing those policies that make sense. We got to understand that, and we can't be afraid to talk about that. I'm going to debate today on the floor an amendment to the Transportation Appropriation Bill. Our amendment says this bill has a 38% increase over 2008 baseline spending levels. And we're going to say, look, let's take it back to 2008. Before all the stimulus, before all the bailout, before all the crazy, ridiculous spending around here, let's go back to that baseline number and save the taxpayers $18 billion and take that initial first step into bringing some sanity back to the fiscal process here in town. And we can't be afraid to do that. I'll go to the floor. The liberals will say you're a mean, hard-hearted, crazy conservative, and oh, don't you think we need infrastructure? But of course we need infrastructure, but at what expense? I mean, Boehner has a great question he asked. Is this spending so important we're willing to send the bill to you, to the next generation, and to our kids, and frankly, I mean, that's the question. Right now, what we're doing is it's the equivalent. The federal government's the equivalent of a family making $50,000 but spending $80,000 every single year. So it's ridiculous, and we have to. And I'll debate it, and they'll say you're a crazy conservative, and I'll say you guys are crazy liberals who want to bankrupt the country, and the American people will decide this November. So the economic challenge. Finally, the third challenge is the values debate in this country, and I referenced that our party is the party that should be in a strong and confident way defending traditional values. And I actually think if we don't win the third debate, if we don't win the values debate, we may not have the toughness and the fortitude it takes to win the other 2 debates, to win the other 2 and deal with the other 2 challenges. So it's important that we not abandon those. And it's not just respect for human life. It's not just honoring and promoting the key institution of the family. It's respect for the free market. It's respect for the work ethic. It's respect for those basic American values that made us the greatest nation ever in the first place. So that's your challenge. Those three big things. I appreciate all that you do. Staff on Capitol Hill make a huge difference, and young staff with your aggressive tenacity and conservative principles is just critical. That wasn't too bad for a politician. That was pretty quick, right? That wasn't all that. You guys get asked questions. One thing I would also tell you is this. When I first ran for office, nobody gave me a chance. My background is the sport of wrestling. I was assistant wrestling coach at Ohio State University. Never been in politics, never really been involved. Got tired of government taking my money, telling me what to do, and insulting my values in the process, and said, you know what? I think I'm going to run for office. Decided to run for state representative when the guy retired. No one gave us a chance. I was Joe Bag of Donuts wrestling coach, never been in office, going to run for state representative. And went and talked to, where I'm from, if you win the primary, you're probably going to win the general. It's a conservative part of the state. Went and talked to some of the party officials in our home county. And they basically said, well, you're a nice young guy, Jordan, but take a hike and come back in about 15 years. This two-term county commissioner is going to win, and you don't have a chance, and blah, blah. The things you always hear when you're trying to do something that you think makes sense and makes a difference. And I politely said, we'll see. I always, that's why they play the game on Friday night, to find out who's going to win. There's always one team that's favored, but sometimes the underdog wins. And so we went to work. We had a bunch of good folks help us out, a bunch of pro-life, pro-family homeschoolers knocking on doors, and we ran circles around this guy because he was arrogant and thought he had it in the bag. And we wound up beating him 70-30. If you follow politics, that's just a smash. And it was so much fun. So if you're thinking about running and people are telling you, no way you can do it, you get people's advice, and we did, and always do things in as smart and intelligent way as you can, but don't let people talk you out of it. I learned, you apply the same principles you learned in other things, you can accomplish some things you set out to do. And the key is this: hard work doesn't guarantee you're going to win, but it sure improves your chances.